Yeah, happy to do that. Thank you, Alistair.
Of course. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining. We are gonna get started with today's Education Standards Committee meeting with first an update actually from President Sutter around our social studies standards work. President Sutter, I'll pass to you first.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative Chang. I apologize for not being on video with you all, but I appreciate you including me in tonight's meeting. So I shared via email a few updates, and I'll just voice them over now and then take any questions folks might have about them. The first update is about the timeline for the release of the draft standards. As of this afternoon, we have heard from OSSE that they are aiming to have the standards released by our April 6th working session. I don't have any more details than that, so I don't know whether we will have them much before the actual time of the working session, but we are putting it on the working session agenda and we'll leave time for discussion, at least of the process of the public comment period during the meeting. The public comment period will remain open for 30 days once the standards have been placed out for public comment. I did communicate with Dr. Grant, who has read the standards, says she thinks they're in good shape, says she thinks they are courageous. I will let you know, she sent me a screenshot of her screen as she was beginning to read the standards. And the introduction to the standards actually pulled language directly from the state board's resolution about what needed to change. So I was incredibly pleased to see that. Representative Wattenberg, you'll remember that in the resolution, we talk about the need for increasing rich content in the early grades, understanding of civic dispositions, and all of that appears in the intro to the standards. So that's what we know about the timeline. The next thing we talked about was the outreach and communications plan. So as you might expect, there is some expectation that our release of the standards may draw attention from outside the district, given recent legislation and regulations in Virginia, as well as things happening around the country with legislation attempting to limit what is taught in schools around elements of the United States history or access to texts or approaches to civics. So in preparation for that, OSSE is coordinating with the state board as well as with the mayor's office to talk about communications. As I understand it, the first meeting on that the state board is part of is happening tomorrow. John Paul is expected to attend with other members of our staff, and we'll get an update to the committee about that after that. But we expect that there'll be talking points for members about how to talk about the standards, about what to do if media or people outside the district reach out to you to talk about the standards, and some general ways of handling communications related to the standards once we have them. The final piece I think I was asked to give an update on is the panel. So I understand that Alex is working on that in conjunction with Representative Chang. I did get a communication from Dominique Spear, who is at the DC History Center and had been someone we reached out to about being a panelist in the winter when we thought our standards would be ready for public comment at that time. She is interested and remains willing to serve as a panelist, and I told her to stand by for more information. So as we have more information on specific timing of when the standards will be out, the kinds of questions we might hope for our panelists to respond to, I know that Alex will be reaching out to those folks. So I'll stop there and see if folks have any questions.
Thank you, President Sutter. Dr. O'Leary.
Thank you, President Sutter, for especially the thing about what's going to happen once the standards are out there. Because, I do get asked questions about, well, you all have the same stuff happen at your school board meetings that are happening all over in different parts of the country. And I can't remember, it's been a long time since anybody's come as to a meeting or as even on Zoom, that's like brought up controversial topics that are against what we decide is right. I think that that's a great way to, we have to be proactive in what we're going to be talking about, and not, and united as a board, that what we're saying about the standards are what everybody agrees on. And I don't think that anyone that disagrees with the standards themselves that we're going to put forward. But I know that, I mean, with the way that the tenor is in the country, there are a lot of people that just get in trucks and start driving around the Beltway so that they can get their picture on TV, kind of things. So I'm sure that there'll be, I would think that there would be some kind of a pushback when we mention anything that has to do with real history.
And I think that's a good segue, Dr. O'Leary, to Malayo. Malayo, thanks for joining us today. I know that you've been putting some thought into this, and I appreciate you joining. Would you join us now and share some of what you've been working on and thinking about?
Hi. I'm putting together a comms plan very loosely. We will have a lot more answers tomorrow after we meet with comms at OSSI. After that, you all will receive some guidance, some language on what to say, how we're going to approach feedback from the public. We're trying to make sure that we kind of triage all of our messaging, so everyone's saying the same things. So a lot of it would get routed through myself and John Paul. That way we can have the appropriate spokespeople address those things. As much as possible, we do want to control the way we're responding and being very careful with our language and making sure we're still on the same message as OSSI. It's very important that OSSI and the state board are saying the same thing. So more clarity on that tomorrow, and definitely guidance sometime probably early next week.
Fabulous.
Representative Chang, I just want to say my thanks to Malayo. I know that she's been working so hard on this, and I'm not being able to see people. I didn't realize that you were in the meeting, Malayo, but I have an immense gratitude for the work that you are putting in on this, and I'm so looking forward to learning how we should best approach this, specifically to make sure that we're reflecting that the standards are meant to provide an accurate accounting of history for the students of the District of Columbia, to make sure that they have access to the kind of information that we all believe they deserve to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
I agree. And so moving through, just finishing up social study standards before Jess has to run.
I have a
Hey, Representative Wattenberg.
thanks. I'm sorry, I couldn't get on and I can't get my video on. So one, I just want to say I missed the beginning of Jessica's comments, so I hope she'll repeat them. But I want to raise one concern I do have about the way we're talking about this. Hi, everybody, which is we haven't seen the standards yet. Nobody on the committee has seen the standards. I don't think we should be putting ourselves in a defensive crouch that just says we're in favor of them. We think they're great no matter what. That to me is exactly not the way to approach this. These are standards that are being put out for comment, and we need to look at them and have an open mind and look at them. That's sort of our job. And I think to jump out in front and say everybody needs to be saying the same thing and we can't talk to the press, and I think that is not, I mean, I would love to have, advice, absolutely. And, as we come together on particular ideas about it, to have some common statements, but we're not nearly there yet. And we haven't seen them. Our constituents haven't seen them.
I don't think I heard that from Malayo. Malayo, were you saying that you were giving advice or that you would speak on behalf of the board?
To clarify, like I said, we're meeting with OSSI tomorrow, and I believe it is an understanding that we will have an idea of what it is before it's public. Not tomorrow, but at some point. From there, we will draw talking points. These are suggestions. This is what OSSI and the board, whatever we're discussing tomorrow, that's what will come out of it. So no, I'm not telling you what to say or that we all have to be on the same message. I am saying that we should triage these things and make sure they're going through the appropriate channels within the board, because it can get messy and some things you say can end up on national news. So we're just trying to be careful when I'm speaking to messaging.
And
And
Representative
Representative
Wattenberg,
Chang, would you mind if I add one more thing?
sure.
So Representative Wattenberg, everything I said in the opening is what I said in my email, so I won't take time to repeat it, but it is exactly as I noted in my email earlier today. What I will add is, to put a fine point on it, I think the areas of alignment we want to be clear on have less to do with some of the specifics members may want to see added to the standards or tweaked in the standards, but have more to do with the representation of the American story in the standards. Happy to talk more about that with you personally, but I think the areas of alignment we're seeking to speak with one voice on have to do with the areas of likely opposition from voices outside the district. Again, happy to talk more with you about that, but just want to be clear that we're certainly not expecting that everyone will simply blanket approve of the draft standards. That's why they're draft.
Yeah, and we need to be
Representative?
clear about that, yeah. I
And
mean,
so-
part of the review process is to be able to raise issues so they can be solved,
Agreed,
right? So people shouldn't feel like there's only one way to view them and.
agreed.
So Ruth, for example, if I can jump in really quickly, I just want to be super clear. What I'm basically saying is that a lot of questions, even when we were putting the committee together, came up about how we did that, the demographics behind that, what was our process, things like that. So those facts and demographics and percentages is what I'm talking about when I talk about let's be aligned in our messaging. I'm not asking anyone.
Not about the content of the standards.
Right. It's how did we arrive here, trying to explain to the public what the process is, because although this might be familiar to the DC audience on a national level, it's probably not. So I just want us to be clear on the process of how we got here. The contents of it doesn't concern me as much because that can go either way. But let's be clear on all the hard work the state board staff and members have put into getting to this point with OSCE.
All right. And
So Representative Wattenberg, if you could take a look at President Sutter's email and follow up with her after this, that would be super.
I will, I'll put in the chat what I think I missed, but that's fine.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to the next point on social studies standards around public outreach. What's the best way, Darren, for us to get back to you on this reviewers and outreach list? Or Mr. Hayworth?
Sorry, so what's the best way for members to get back with us on?
Sorry, the agenda links to a social study reviewers and panelist outreach list.
Yes. So this is the list. If there are additional ones to add, certainly just send us those emails and we will add them to the list to talk about who we should send out and ask for folks to review once we have them.
Great, and for the sake of time, I'd prefer if we have that conversation over email and then bring it up in the next meeting if there's disagreement. Representative Wattenberg?
Oh, that's my old hand.
Oh, okay. Great.
And
so then we are moving on to this public meeting panel, which connects to our, well, that's the panel that President Sutter mentioned. President Sutter, is there anything that you'd like us to do as a committee to make sure that we're moving that forward?
I don't think so. I think if anyone has more questions about the panel, reaching out to Darren and Alex is the right answer there. We had already established the members of this panel and discussed it with the committee back when we thought the standards would be released earlier last year in the winter. And so nothing to my knowledge has changed during that time, but Alex is really taking point on that. So if folks have questions or want to know more, please do reach out to our staff and they'll be happy to loop you in.
Okay, great. And I'm just going to put in the chat so it's in public record who we are currently. Hey, Zachary. Excuse me, Representative Parker. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Who we're who's currently on that panel that we're planning to invite. Is that correct, President Sutter?
That's correct. So
Okay.
we'll invite them, hope that they accept. I do believe there's also a few additional folks in case all of our panelists that we are hoping first to invite might not be available on that evening.
Great. And so to members of the committee, Representative Wattenberg.
No, so there was a substantially longer list of people that we wanted to hear from. So what's happening with that list? Like I remember the National Center for History Education was on it, and I don't remember who else. Anyway, are we also approaching them, but not for a panel?
Mr. Hayworth or President Sutter, would you take that one?
Yeah, Representative Wattenberg, the longer list that you got the link to, I believe yesterday, is a link of people, the list of people to whom we plan to reach out to ask them to weigh in during the public comment period. We're going to send personal invitations to all folks on that list. This conversation we're having is about the panel. So we'll have somewhere between 3 and 5 people come to speak more thoroughly on their response to the standards that are out for public comment. Just like we do at public meetings on other topics, this public panel will be specific to the social studies standards and will have to, by virtue of logistics, be smaller.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we are reaching out to the others. And can we still add some names to that?
Yeah, so that's what we were discussing in the
Okay.
point before, Representative Wattenberg, of letting Mr. Hayworth know if
Okay.
if we want to add folks to it.
Okay.
I think that wraps up social studies standards. We've got several to-do items for each of us before our next meeting. Did I miss anything, President Sutter?
Nope, not a thing.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
then let's go back to the top of the agenda, and I understand that you've got to hop off at some point, President Sutter. So thanks for joining us for this part. And so at the top, we have our work plan. And like last time, I will share my screen so we are all looking at the same thing. And would like if we could just go through and make sure we are keeping things up to date. So actually, while we've got you, President Sutter, is there any change to our work plan from the social studies work that moves from in progress to complete or from not started to in progress?
So not having eyes on it at the moment, I don't want to say for sure
Okay.
one way or another, but the only
May I
thing
ask
that
you
is,
to up?
yeah, I will absolutely update it when I am in front of a screen.
Great. And sorry, you were saying?
The only thing that I think will change is the timeline of anything that happens between now and the vote date. But that is all that I have that might be updated.
Okay. And on my side, I'm continuing to work with OSSI. I got to speak on the OSSI literacy convening that happened earlier today. And I'm really excited that they're prioritizing this work. And there were over 150 educators from across the city that were on these sessions and breakout groups, kind of workshopping together on how we move literacy forward. And I find that really exciting. So I will have more to update folks on there, I hope for the next meeting. And then I think this is where I pass to Leave and Alex to talk through how things are going on our process of revising standards generally. And so this is both updating the work plan and getting an update from you, Leave.
Awesome. So I don't think Mr. Jew is here, but we met with Miss Miranda on the 10th of this month. It was me, Mr. Jew, and Miss Miranda. And we kind of, I got some background on everything that's been happening up until this point, since I did miss a little bit of that. And we kind of talked about the goals that we have, and especially regarding the panel. the plan is to reach out to states, and I don't know if this has started happening yet. Miss Miranda would probably know more about that than I do, but reaching out to states and seeing what their process is, if they have one for engaging with students, and then asking to potentially speak with those students through that 90-minute panel. And we were also talking about having one of those students possibly be either Alex O'Sullivan or Alyssa Richardson. I believe, yeah, Alyssa Richardson, who was students who gave perspective on the social studies standards already. So I believe that is specifically what we have done so far. But Miss Miranda, I would appreciate anything that I missed. It was a lot of just review of what's already happened.
Great.
And I think most of these things that are in progress are already in progress, except the convened panel of experts from other jurisdictions should probably be shifted to in progress.
Perfect. Thank you. And is everything else timeline-wise on track for this? Does this all still feel feasible given what you've learned?
Yes, let me pull it up on my screen so I can see it a little bit larger.
Okay. While you're looking that up, we're joined today by Will Beckerman, who really did the groundwork for us to pass SR 21-7 on LGBTQ+ inclusive education standards. Leave, have you been in touch with Will?
I have not. Am I on mute?
Okay.
No, I have not. Also, looking at the timeline, it looks like everything so far is up to date. I think we haven't yet decided on like a specific time when we could have the input from panelists. We also decided that we probably wanted to have it be like two separate groups meeting with the SAC, or having someone join, the SAC meeting to discuss this, and then having a separate panel of students. And it seems like that will probably end up happening in May. So we have time to talk to people, but also have time to get the ball rolling on that. Everything else looks to be everything else looks to be correct.
Great. Two tactical things, and then I see your hand, Representative Wattenberg. One, if you're open to talking with Will, would you put your contact information in the chat box? And would love if you two could connect.
Yes, I'll put it right now.
And the second piece is, before our next committee meeting, how far do you think we can get in this next phase of the work?
So that might be a better question for Miss Miranda. It seems like people are already reaching out to potential panelists, and I think once we have people on board, it shouldn't be that difficult to kind of get the ball rolling on it. It's just about reaching out to other states as of right now, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Great.
I can quickly jump in too
Please.
and just give a quick update. So I'm currently reaching out to Tennessee, Colorado, their state boards, and they've been really responsive in supporting with providing a potential connection to their student representative. So the ball's rolling with being potential panelists. So still in progress with reaching out to different states though. So making those connections right now.
Great. So we're aiming towards getting this panel, and then that will create the ground kind of foundations for the next phase of the work, right? Is how you're thinking about it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, super. Okay, so it seems like things are moving along for us, and I would still very much appreciate folks' feedback on the vision and recommendations draft on literacy that I shared last time around. This is something that I'm continuing to work on with our colleagues at OSCE to help move forward. And so your feedback as I continue those conversations is very helpful. And otherwise, we are moving things forward. So there's a NASB early literacy bullet point on the agenda, and I'm assuming that's coming from you, Mr. Hayworth. So if you could speak to that, that would be super.
I don't believe that it is actually
Great.
from me,
Great.
but I do know that NASB is working on some with some grant funding related to early literacy. And we did get I had a call with the NASB staff related to some of the work that they were doing. And it sounds interesting. We're sort of too late in the cycle to join the actual cohort for the research right now. But I think we will be able to use that information that we're getting from NASB in future efforts. And so I'll make sure to keep the committee posted. If anyone from the committee would like to participate in some of those conversations, I'm sure that they would be welcome, and I can connect them with the right people at NASB.
Super, thank you. And since I've been jumping around our agenda this whole time, I'm going to jump back to the top. We've got we worked through work plan, but for funding requests, did folks have any feedback on? And this is an email Mr. Ju sent out March 17th with the funding requests that we had discussed in the last meeting. Any feedback on that? And then there was a question from President Sutter that I wanted to talk through with you all.
I thought you did a good job capturing in that memo what we had talked about funding. So
super. Great. Okay, so the question is about our proposed engagement sessions, and President Sutter asked if we envision these engagement sessions as standalone opportunities, or if one or more of them would take place as part of an SBOE in the city type event. My first reaction is actually, I would love for, if President Sutter and the social studies standards work has a piece of the budget to decide how to spend that, to make sure we're engaging as many of our constituents and educators as we can around it. If I can work with you all on this committee to decide how that literacy piece gets spent, and then if Leave can decide how that piece around, you know, reviewing our standards gets spent. So not giving a direct answer to President Sutter, but actually thinking through how each of those sub pieces of our work can utilize that, if folks are open to that.
Could we hear from John Paul about the way that the distribution goes on that?
Sure. So we haven't made any decisions as a board yet where to spend the funds that we do have available. So at the working session, all of the work plans and budgets, that's why it's really important for each committee to submit their proposal. And then the board will discuss all of the proposals together and then make decisions and make prioritizations. So the committee may be proposing some things that may not end up being fully funded because we don't have enough money to pay for everything. For instance, I know some of the committees are proposing things that are in the $35,000 to $50,000 range as their total for their committee work. And if each committee does that, then that is way more than what we actually have. And so I think this committee and all committees should submit those types of budget that would be the sort of everything that we want to do, and this is how much it would cost. And then the board itself will be able to make those determinations of where to put the money and where are the priorities.
Okay, so right now we have it such that then Leave would have 2,500 to use to maximize student engagement around this process. That I would have 2,500 to maximize. I would focus on educators and families engagement around our literacy work, and then President Sutter would have 2,500 to engage the list of folks that we've got, right, and families and a broader audiences around the social studies standards. Mr. Hayworth, Mr. Fleischer, does that make sense?
That makes
sense. Okay.
Alistair, question real quick.
Is it about this? Otherwise, Representative Wattenberg had her hand up first around.
It is about this, but go
Okay.
for it, Representative Wattenberg.
Actually, my hand was up from before and then I took it down and then I put it up. So I'm not really next, but I'm going to go very quickly anyway, which is just to ask, is the plan that we're going to do the social studies engagement on its own and then separately at another point do the literacy engagement on its own and so on? I'm not.
I think that to me, that makes more sense because we're also trying to engage different audiences, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so I think it's more efficient and effective that way.
Thanks.
And Leave, I'll follow up with you on this. So that's everything on our agenda. So I'm gonna
Didn't
hop back
Zachary
over
have a
to
question?
Representative Wattenberg on her question and feedback on the literacy piece. Would you mind just naming it?
Me?
Representative Wattenberg. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that in these different drafts as they go forward on the literacy, the two concerns that I have that I just want to make sure get in there. One is that, we make sure that there's a staffing at the elementary level in particular, such that at any school, there's the right mix of people with the right training and deployed in the right way, such that every student is getting screened by somebody who knows what they're doing, and any student who needs tier 2 or tier 3 intervention can get that immediately, right? The part of this is you don't wait 6 months. You don't have to go through an IEP referral, but it starts on Monday. And that requires, enough people at the school level to know what they're doing and to sort of, some tier 2 can be handled by the classroom teacher if she's properly trained and properly scheduled. But sometimes you can't do the tier 2 with the main teacher. You need somebody else. And tier 3, I think everybody would say you need probably somebody special. Anyway, so that's one thing. And so far, none of the drafts have quite gotten to that. And I just really feel like the whole thing can become a wreck on that rock. And the second is, we are asking teachers to teach in a very particular way and to take seriously very particular understandings of how students learn. And that can be conveyed in a way that feels very much like, that can feel very offensive to teachers. And it can be conveyed in ways that is more compatible because people are engaged in understanding why and engaged in seeing how it works. And it would be very easy and such a shame if a lot of this foundered on doing the staff development in a way that was very insensitive, top down, didn't give people chances to learn, didn't have good coaching, et cetera, et cetera. So I just.
Point taken. And I think what's informed, just naming that second piece first, what's informed the recommendations from me most is that there's been a wait list for the DC Reading Clinic, right? Yep. That educators want this training.
And that's terrific training. That is terrific training. If it can all be like that, I don't have any concerns.
Yeah. And to the first, I hear you. And I think my response is more about just tactically, how do we do that, right? And to whom? So I'd appreciate if we could talk a little bit more about strategy offline for that. I'd love your input. Representative O'Leary.
Yes, this is a question for you, Alistair.
Yeah.
Like the meeting that you had today, are you getting buy-in from the administration?
Yeah.
On down about what Ruth is talking about, because that's the key.
Yeah.
Key is that to identify students right away, which we've been talking about for as long as I've been on the board.
Yeah.
And it's not being done. And if it's not done, then all the rest of it is, like, to use Ruth's metaphor, it's on the rocks.
Yeah. So the Dibbles was brought up multiple times, and Representative Wattenberg has been a part of a lot of that advocacy and work that we've done from the dyslexia bill onwards, right? And so the naming that was repeated over and over again by OSSI and DCPS representatives that I found very helpful was, don't pay for a screener for the sake of paying for a screener. Make sure that we use it right. Make sure that our educators, our reading instructors know how to interpret DIPL so that they're authorized, right, by their school leaders to be able to adapt then learning opportunities according to what they learn from that screener, right? And so not everyone needs the same intervention. And the reason we have these kinds of screeners is to figure out what the right intervention is, right? And a big piece of, I think, what the DC Reading Clinic, for example, has been, and why teachers want it, is that they learn those pieces from that. So if that's answering your question.
Not quite.
Okay.
Because you brought it up though, do the administrators understand the importance of this whole concept? Because a lot of times what I found, and I'll just expand it a little bit, as far as AP is concerned, which is at the other end of the spectrum from whether or not you can read or not to teaching advanced placement classes. A lot of the administrators and higher, I'm talking about local administrators, principals and assistant principals, don't understand the value of AP to their program. All right. And if the kids can't read, then there's nothing is going to happen positively to any program in any school. And so, when we talk about birth to 3 or whatever, that's where the emphasis has to be that students, once our students can read, they can do anything else. And if they can't do anything else except what the school to prison pipeline offers in a lot of ways.
Dr. Leary, I think what if I'm hearing that right, it's to make sure that school leaders, right? When you say administrators, I'm thinking folks that work within DCPS and OSSI central office.
I'm really talking about people in the building.
You mean people in the building?
Principals, the assistant principals have to be, but from downtown, because downtown puts a lot of fear in those people. And so they don't want to veer away from what they're supposed to do. But if they are told what they're supposed to do is make sure that those students who can't read are given the services so that they can, then that's what has to happen.
It was not a big part of the conversation today. It is a big part of the vision and recommendations that the work that we've been convening has been pushing forward to make sure that school leaders authorize their educators to do this and also get a piece of this training themselves as well to understand it, right? So it is very much part of what, when I talk with folks, is part of the ask. My commitment to you is it will continue to be a part of the ask, because I don't see this working without that layer buying in.
It won't at all.
Yeah.
You're right. And that's what we really have to push.
All right. So we've gone through the whole thing, the whole agenda. Is there anything else that folks want to raise before our time is up?
I have a question for John Paul about the NASB conference. My civic duty is to be on a jury. And right now I've been called. But if is there a way to walk in if I'm not, I've got to be registered, and is it too late to register? Should I register, and then if I don't go, should I do it that way? Okay. If you could send me that stuff again, I'll do that right now.
So we can register for you because there's a payment as well that needs to happen. And so Representative Wattenberg, I see you too. You wouldn't be registered for the legislative.
Well, can you send me the stuff and then I'll tell you which days I can go to, or just make sure it's all going to work.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and Fraser, do you want me to also just register you for the whole thing, or just send you and let you know which days?
Yeah, if that's okay with you, then do that. Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. And I do
Thank you.
want to specifically note that Representative Bernstad will be a star speaker at the kickoff for the conference. So it's a
That's
really highlight
awesome.
of the event.
Oh, we'll make sure that, I hope that I'm not on jury duty that day.
That's awesome.
I'll just have to tell the judge that, hey, you know, I can't make it.
Representative Parker.
Yeah, I wanted to elevate Representative Bernstad's question as it was mine, just more so around like the budget asks for those three categories, which I heard as social studies, literacy, and like the student engagement around like learning standards broadly, and like what we are intending or like what we imagine that money to go towards.
Yeah. Okay.
And-
I'm happy to. Yeah.
And the second part of that, is that dictated by those three individuals? So I guess you or President Sutter and Representative Bernstad, or does that come back to the committee for decision points?
Yeah, yes. So when we wanted to make sure that those three pieces of the work have feedback and engagement from our constituents and stakeholders, and the staff had said that our engagement work last year, in last year's budget for the kind of two events, I guess we had were, Mr. Hayworth, was I right that it was 7,500 or something like that in cost? So that, you know, breaking that apart into, instead of just, you know, for our committee to have the equivalent of the cost of one of those engagement, and then we decide as a committee how to spend it, with sort of an informal earmark around having a third on each of the main priorities for us.
Gotcha.
And that's everything from booking space to having a translator, or just to make it as accessible and engaging as we can to make sure that our stakeholders can accessibly give us the feedback.
Question. I know that the board is prevented by some rule from feeding people or whatever that is. Can we contract with someone to do that?
Really? We can't feed anyone at all? Okay.
Can we get an exception to that in some way?
So we've been working on it, and as you'll recall, in the fall, we did have some food available. So we can file an appeal and ask for specific things, but it takes time. And so that's another one of the things that I need to know ahead of time. And what we found is that, you know, we have to plan well enough in advance for X number of people. And so if X minus 20 show up, we have a lot of stuff left over. And so I just want to be a little cautious on putting too much money towards food and delivery and those types of things, because we potentially would be wasting lots of food, and that's not great either.
So I guess I want to weigh in heavily on two things. One is if there's a way to get an exception from the council somehow so that we can always do things, we should do. I mean, DCPS always feeds people. Why can't we?
They have a different procurement system than we do.
Well, but that's,
It's a procurement rule. It's not necessarily, it's not a council legislative type thing.
but there must be a way to have an exception to a procurement rule when there's a really good
So
reason
like
for
I
it.
just described, we have gotten.
I
them in the
don't know,
past.
I understand, but I'm saying the nature of what we do is that people are gonna come at the last minute. That's how it works. And here's why I'm raising it. Let me just say it. And I understand it's hard. I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I'm just trying to, I was at the PAVE meeting last week, and I know many of you have been to PAVE, and you go in, and Fraser was there as well. You go in and there's coffee and there's drinks and there's breakfast, and then at the end of it there's lunch, and it just creates a different kind of atmosphere, and it creates more. And then there's childcare in the next room, right? And so all that's going on, and it creates an expectation that when you go to their meetings, that's what you'll find. And I think, until we're able to kind of create that kind of expectation, it's just always going to be hard to get more than a handful of people. So that's why I'm saying it.
Yeah, I'll say, I mean, the way that the exception process works is we have to submit it for each event. So we would not be able to do a blanket waiver, and the CFO won't approve that.
Okay, well, I'm going to vote against the CFO.
Representative Bernstadt?
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering if someone could send me any like a copy of any information of the engagement sessions that the Education Standards Committee did last year or the board did last year, because I don't really know what any of them are, and I think it would help give me some perspective on what we're talking about and what that looks like moving forward.
Yep. Great.
But I think it's important to say that was the first one we've done, I think, you know, under this board. And so don't take it as this is what they have to look like, but rather this is what we did. And
you won't be doing it alone. I think this gets into Representative Parker's question. It's the committee working with you on it, but that segment is what you're taking lead on. So we'll turn to you for it, but we'll help you in that process.
Yeah, of course. I just
I
don't
do
want to
think
miss any context when we talk about last year we did this. I don't know what that means.
Yep, understood. Okay. Well, if folks are good with this, then I will say that it's time for us to wrap up. And we've got our list of to-dos for the next meeting. Any last minute questions or things that need to come up?
There's an event at Cardozo tonight with the mayoral.
I'm going.
candidate.
I'm going. You going?
Yep.
Oh, it's in.
Anybody
No campaign talk, please. Thank you.
Oh, no, it's an event.
You can
at
say you're
the-
going to an
I'm just
event,
inviting
it's a
people to come to
debate.
Cardozo. So you can see what the building looks like.
Thank
I'm
you all
not
so
saying who
much.
I'm for, except for the CFO, but I think
Thank you
can
so
say
much
it's
for joining us tonight.
forum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Leave, do you have a second? Okay.
Bye, everyone.